Beto O'Rourke, it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about your future. Are you going to run for the Senate next year?
I don't know. The question I'm trying to answer is, how can I be as useful and helpful as I possibly can at this moment? Country clearly has never been through anything like this. The center of the trouble that we face in America, we really find in Texas, where, as you know, today the governor has commenced a special session where they're planning to redraw up to 5 congressional districts to help the president maintain his purchase on power in the House of Representatives. I'm holding town hall meetings. I'm registering people to vote. I'm traveling outside of Texas to preach the gospel of Texas and try to build support and reserves for the fight that we have back home. And if that resolves in a candidacy, if it means that I continue to work as a private citizen and a volunteer, if it's something else, it really doesn't matter to me. But for me, like so many Americans, my kids, they're my conscience. And they're going to ask me at some point, hey, when all this was breaking down in America, what did you do? And I want to be able to say I did everything I possibly could. And so that's my North Star right now, and it has brought me here to you today.
With all respect, that does sound in certain ways to be a cautiously political answer to a direct question.
Yeah.
How are you weighing whether or not to do this? Because it's not just a decision for you. Mm-hmm. It's a decision that has implications for those who've already announced for this race and for those who are trying to figure out whether they should wait for you. So
right. Yeah.
Can you offer me some clarity?
Sure, I will. And I think
or maybe a timeline or somehow, how are you going to weigh this?
Yeah, so the answer is honest. I don't know. The criteria that I'm thinking through are a result of my experience running for statewide office. You know, in 2018, we got within 2.5% of Ted Cruz. It was transformational for the state of Texas. It was amazing, but at the end of the day, we didn't win. And I'm convinced that if I had been joined with other powerful, strong candidates for governor, attorney general, lieutenant governor, one of us, maybe all of us, would have punched through in 2018, and we would be living in a different America now. So, you know, could I win the Democratic primary for Senate in Texas? I think I could. Is that the right thing to do if I don't also have a team of powerful candidates who can complement one another, be mutually supportive, and make sure that we actually win? Because this is not going to be graded on effort. This will really decide the balance of power in America. So for all the reasons you just gave, I'm really making sure that I make this about the people of Texas and the people of this country, not about what I feel or want to do or what might be good for my political career, but what's really going to help. So traveling and listening to people is always the best way for me to think through an issue. You can get lost in your own head, but if you're out in Abilene or Fort Worth or Tyler, Texas, and you're with the people that you actually want to serve, they'll tell you what's most important to them, and they'll tell you what they're looking for in a leader. And then I can reflect on that and think about what it's going to take to actually bring it to pass, either again as a candidate or someone who's supporting candidates.
Beto, what happened to you in 2018, was that a false positive for Texas Democrats? Meaning it was closer, it looked closer than it actually was because your subsequent statewide efforts did not come close to what happened in 2018? The 2024 election was a much bigger blowout than 2020 or 2016. There is a narrative that Democrats keep white whaling themselves into believing they're going to get something out of Texas that ain't going to be got.
It was actually closer than it looked, and I'll explain. You know, not only did I win more Democratic votes than any predecessor, the first Democrat since '64 with LBJ to win the 5 major urban areas and their surrounding counties, below ballot, 12 insurgent Democrats defeated 12 incumbent Republicans for the state house. Colin Allred defeated Pete Sessions, entrenched incumbent member of Congress. We saw Lizzie Panel Fletcher do it in the South. And then in Houston, Texas, 17 black women won election to judicial positions. Major, it was so transformative that when the legislature met in 2019 and then again in 2021, they changed the voting laws to make Texas, bar none, the toughest state in the nation in which to register to vote and in which to cast a ballot. And those voter restrictions are targeted at those who are most likely to vote for Democrats. It doesn't explain everything. And so I don't want to tell you that that's the only reason that Democrats have not been winning in the state of Texas, but it is a big part of the answer. And it's why I'm so focused and have been for the last 6 years on registering the Texans that we need to win, and then helping those newly registered Texans navigate the most Byzantine set of election laws anywhere in America, certainly since Jim Crow and the Voting Rights Act in 1965. So Texas is very much there. The extremism that you see, the abortion ban, leading the nation in gun violence, 3 years after Uvalde, nothing's changed to make it less likely that any other child meet the same fate as those 19 kids. That's not what most of us in the state want. But when you have more than 9 million registered Texans not casting a ballot in the gubernatorial election, so many millions sitting it out in 2024, I think that reflects not so much that we're a red state, but a non-voting state. The task for me and anybody working on this is how do we get people to vote?
You said recently that Texas Democrats need to be ruthless, or maybe Democrats nationwide need to be ruthless on this question of redistricting. What did you mean by that?
I think far too often Democrats are more interested in being right than they are in being in power. And what I've seen of today's modern Republicans under Donald Trump is they care more about being in power than anything else, including being right or ethical or moral or working within the law. I'm not encouraging Democrats to break the law, but redistricting, as an example, let's match fire with fire. In California, Governor Newsom arguably has the power to help redraw districts in that state to Democratic advantage. Now, I know no one likes members of Congress choosing their own voters, myself included, but we don't have a chance to change that until we actually win power. And if we're coloring in the lines while the Republicans are tearing up the coloring book right in front of us, we're going to continue to lose power and be less relevant to the Americans that we want to support and help. And look, this may sound hyperbolic to some of your viewers and listeners, and maybe even to you, but Trump has promised that he is going to pursue a third term. He told us before he was elected he would be a dictator on day one. He joked, or maybe he didn't joke, that you vote in this election in 2024, you'll never have to vote again. If we do not win a majority in the House of Representatives, we will have lost our best check on tyranny, on fascism and authoritarianism in the United States of America. That is my core belief. And we will have some answering to do if we fail at this moment of truth. Our kids or grandkids are going to be wondering, why didn't you step up and save this country when you had the chance? So not everything is going to appeal to everyone, but we must do everything we can with what we have right now, or we're going to lose the republic.
Is America a tyrannical country now?
It is descending into it as quickly as anyone has seen, anyone in living memory. We've never seen a crisis of constitution, rule of law, or government of the people, by the people, for the people, since perhaps the attacks that preceded the Civil War and the loss of more than 300,000 Union dead to preserve this country as a free nation and to end slavery and defeat the Confederacy. I sure as hell hope that this does not descend into further violence and armed conflict. I want us to resolve this democratically, peacefully, and nonviolently. But within those parameters, let us do everything that we can, because if we fail to do that, the other side is going to consolidate this power, and it might very well spell the end of this noble experiment.
What are the signposts, Beto O'Rourke, from your vantage point of this descent to tyranny?
Masked, plainclothes federal agents without badges or warrants sweeping Americans up off the street, illegally detaining, imprisoning, deporting them to countries they've never been to. And in some cases, they may be people who are here illegally. In other cases, they are U.S.-born, U.S. citizens. One tragic case, a 5-year-old child with stage 4 cancer who was deported without her medications. This right to due process and our constitutional protections is sacred. I mean, it is as sacred as it gets. Defying the courts and federal court orders, dismantling congressionally chartered agencies, whether it's USAID or the Department of Education, absolutely ignoring precedent, tradition, law, and the Constitution. That is the descent into tyranny. And what we learned from—
Do you put birthright citizenship in there?
Absolutely. It has stood the test of time since 1868, when the 14th Amendment was ratified. And by executive order on his first day in office, this president is trying to destroy it. And by extension, the Constitution. The jury is still out, but it looks as though a very complicit Supreme Court might endorse this lawlessness. They have in some of his other previous actions. So this is what the descent into tyranny and fascism looks like. Adolf Hitler won an election fair and square in Germany. Within 60 days, he was able to use the mechanisms of that country's democracy to dismantle that democracy. We cannot be the unwitting victims of a similar attempt right now to consolidate and seize power in America. This comes down to all of us, and we've got to stand up and be counted.
You mentioned a moment ago that you were cautious about not sounding hyperbolic. Some will just hear what you just said and said you are alleging that America is a Hitlerian place. Are you?
I think Germany in the 1930s offers us perhaps the best example of what happens to a free and independent people when they submit to a tyrant or a dictator. And that lesson has to be learned, or we will fail to honor our history and we will repeat this mistake. You know, I'm not worried about sounding hyperbolic as much as I am about the judgment of history from our great-grandchildren and generations to follow, who will look back and say, hey, why wasn't somebody stepping up when this guy was trying to be a dictator in real time, was destroying the Constitution right in front of the eyes of the American people? Why didn't anybody stand up and do something, say something? Why weren't people fighting back? And I'll tell you from traveling the country, people want us to fight back right now. I think they're sorely disappointed in the leadership of the Democratic Party for not doing more. People want to rally. They want to take action. They want to fight back. They want to win. But when you have leaders in the Senate, for example, who submit to the president on his funding requests, give him a grab bag to do whatever he wants to destroy this country from within, it is not only uninspiring, I think it's defeatist and extinguishes the hope for some that we have a chance to fight back. The alternative to that is what I'm seeing around the country, people who aren't taking orders from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party for that matter, but are coming together in their communities to stand up and be counted, to fight back, to join together in common cause, and to remember who we are at our best. We're the people that defeated the strongest empire on the planet to secure our independence. We're the people who defeated the Confederacy, who defeated fascism in World War II. We're the people who secured voting and civil rights in the 1960s. That's what we're made of. We've inherited all of that. And what we do as the heirs to this great legacy, that's going to define us in the eyes of history, and it will determine what is possible for our country going forward. So you see me here and traveling across the country just trying to do my level best. And I'm joined by millions of Americans trying to do the same. My hope and faith is in the people of this country. I believe we'll come through, but we definitely have to step up.
Would I be oversimplifying it if I said what I just heard from you about Democratic leaders in Washington is that they are too passive and too disorganized to mount a credible resistance to the president?
So far, that certainly seems to be the case. I mean, the biggest fight I mentioned,
Hakeem Jeffries, Chuck Schumer, and everyone else around them.
Especially Chuck Schumer, because one of the most telling moments of this president's second term was this request to fund the government, called a continuing resolution, but essentially keeping the doors open. And in the House, Hakeem Jeffries was able to consolidate unity in his caucus. Every single Democrat but one voted against that continuing resolution. In the Senate, Senator Schumer seemed to indicate that all Democrats would vote against it. And then at the 11th hour, he stepped back and he submitted. He bent the knee to the president, saying something like, we'll wait till his polling numbers come below 41%. I don't think anybody has time for the president's polling numbers to come below 41%. This is a moment that calls for fighters, for champions for the American people, those willing to do literally whatever it takes to save this country. And so I want to see someone in the Senate step up. And we thank Senator Schumer for his service to our country. He's done a wonderful job, but I don't think he's the man for the moment. And if we didn't learn anything else in 2024, we should have learned that, being polite, not offending people's feelings, deferring to seniority, just going along to get along doesn't get us to where we want to be. And in fact, help to produce the crisis that we now find ourselves in.
It would not be unreasonable for me, Beto, to say what you just said will not endear you to the Senate Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee should you decide to run for the United States Senate.
And should I run, that might be a plus and something that I think the people of Texas would appreciate.
You acknowledge that?
Yeah.
That you're picking a fight with those who would be writing and stroking pretty large checks for you?
Yeah.
If you were to run?
Maybe better put, I'm reflecting the sentiment of my fellow Texans. I think they're so deeply disappointed in the lack of leadership and the lack of fight right now. I mean, they're really hurting. I mean, these are the people who live in a state that is the least insured in the country. Nearly 2 million of them are about to lose health insurance from changes to the ACA and the more than 1 million who will be cut from Medicaid. This is a state that's at the epicenter of a maternal mortality crisis. Not only is abortion illegal, there's no protection for the life of the mother, for cases of rape or incest. People are literally dying because they can't get the care that would otherwise save their lives. And perhaps no state has produced more Americans who put their lives on the line for this country. We are home to hundreds of thousands of veterans. The president proposes to cut 83,000 jobs within the VA, most of those positions held by veterans. This is all happening in real time in my home state right now. They want to see us fight back, and they want to see us win.
You spoke of abortion a moment ago. Do you fear the day that some Texans will have their data collected as they leave the state to see if they are trying to obtain abortion services outside of the state of Texas?
We see the prologue to that already. The City Council of Lubbock, Texas, for example, passed an ordinance that forbids pregnant women from driving on their roads if they seek to leave the state to go to another, like New Mexico, where abortion is safe and legal. On a positive note, the council in Amarillo, a little bit higher up in the Panhandle, considered the same issue, but everyday Texans in that community, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, rallied against it for the women of Amarillo to protect their personal freedom, their choices, and their health care. But yes, that fight is very real in Texas right now. And every time you think that it couldn't get more obscene or more extreme, they take it a step further. So we can't be complacent. We absolutely have to fight back.
This November, Zohran Mamdani is going to be running on the general election ballot for New York City mayor. Mikey Sherrill will be running for governor in New Jersey. Abigail Spanberger will be running for governor in Virginia. The two last names I mentioned, Sherrill and Spanberger, consider themselves centrist Democrats. Zohran Mamdani, a socialist Democrat. Which of those three I just mentioned would you say constitutes the compelling future of the Democratic Party?
All three. All three. And I know you're going to say, Major, that was a political answer. And maybe it is, but I really mean
I'm going to say that. That's a political answer.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone earlier today. I ran into Richie Torres, congressman who's more conservative or maybe more centrist, certainly than perhaps the future mayor Mamdani in New York. And, I'd read, bits about him. I didn't know if we were really on the same page. I didn't really know if I liked the guy. I listened to an interview that he did with Sam Harris, and his biography, how he comes to the issues, the decisions that he's made on these issues, like his theory of the case, I found to be very compelling, even if I didn't agree with every part of it. And I just found myself saying, God damn, I'm so glad this guy is a Democrat. By that same token, I think that Mamdani has run one of the most exciting campaigns in America in the last decade, bar none. It was joyful, it was aspirational, it was ambitious, it was focused on other people, perhaps taking a page out of your book.
He says he went to the areas in New York City that most switched to Trump and talked to them.
And I was going to say it would have appealed to you because he was interviewing people. He was saying, hey, who did you vote for in the last election? Why did you vote for them? What would you like to see different in New York? What do you need in your life right now? And from listening to them, he proposed a set of solutions. What if, for those who are eligible, we froze your rent? What if getting to work were easier because the buses were free? What if you can't get fresh and healthy food to feed your kids? We made sure that the city was involved in doing that. Now, does that work everywhere? Would that pass in Texas? Probably not, but that might be the right solution for the people in New York. And look, I think the Democratic Party ignores at its own peril a mandate sent by a city that has more Democrats in it than any other. So, the old guard might try to rally around Cuomo or Adams, and I think that's fine. But I think so much of the future of our party is contained within the campaign of Mamdani, as it is with Spanberger.
And those who are excited by it.
And those who are excited about it, drawing people forward who maybe didn't feel like they had a place or a future in our politics. No one spoke to them. No one spoke like them. No one was acting like a real human being. They were these pre-programmed political robots that you find so noxious, understandably. And so, I think there's real virtue and value in that. And also the beauty of our democracy, insofar as we still have one, is that, Richie Torres is the perfect fit for his district. Abigail Spanberger, you couldn't concoct in a lab a better candidate for the Commonwealth of Virginia. She's perfect, and I wish her all
Not
the
that
success.
she was concocted in a lab.
No, she wasn't. She's a very real human being with an extraordinary biography of her own. In fact, I just saw her parents who came to our Richmond town hall that we had 2 days ago. What I mean to say is that the Democratic Party, to be successful, and for our country by extension to be successful, has to include the broadest possible coalition. We want a true united front. That's how you defeat authoritarianism. That's how you defeat fascism. We saw perhaps a preview of that in France recently for those who came together to try to stop the far-right extremists from taking power in that country. Because as you know, Major, this is not uniquely an American phenomenon. We see the rise of an authoritarian populism across the world right now, much as we did in the 1920s and the 1930s. And America faced a choice at that time. We could have chosen Charles Lindbergh, America First, the American Nazi Party that sold out Madison Square Garden, or we could have chosen Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And thank God we chose him. And I think we're coming to that same fork in the road right now in America. You know, people want dramatic change across the board. It doesn't matter who you are, where you live. This country, most likely than not, is not going in the direction that you want and perhaps has not worked out for you and your family. You're worried that your kids are not going to do better than you are. So you're willing to roll the dice on big dramatic change, hence Donald Trump. We have to be able to offer it on our side. If it's incremental, if it's triangulated, if it's overcalculated, if it's focus group tested and consultant driven, good night and goodbye. This thing is over. So those kind of heroes need to answer the call right now. And I'm beginning to see them in our party, and I'm encouraged.
There was reporting this weekend, Beto, I'm sure you saw, that the Democratic National Committee is going to undertake an autopsy about the 2024 election, but skip over the part involving Biden and Harris.
Yeah, big mistake.
Does that sound like nonsense to you?
Yeah, really dumb. And I'm going to guess that I'm not the only person who feels that way. And, you know, who cares what...
Would you also say that's systematic of the very problem you just described?
Absolutely. Reflective of a party that was unwilling in 2023 and 2024 to have the tough conversations. And I'm guilty of that as well, okay? I don't want to pin this on somebody else. I'm a Democrat. I have a voice in the party. I should have used it. I should have called for an open primary to make sure the very best... How much do you regret that? What's that?
How much do you regret that?
Very much so. We had one job in this country, which was to save this country, and we failed in that job. And the only way that we'll regain credibility with the American people is to say that. You know, everybody screws up from time to time. No one is perfect. I screwed up in that way. I would love more Democrats to admit their culpability in the problem. I would love for us as a party to say, you know what? It turns out that running somebody who would have been the oldest president in American history, who struggled to communicate the extraordinary achievements that they were able to produce in the Biden administration, and who, to the average American, did not look fit to carry on the job for another 4 years. Turns out that was a really bad idea. And we have an embarrassment of talent in our party right now. Why weren't we putting those people forward, these governors and senators and members of Congress and leaders across the country, to debate the ideas and the vision for the future of this country? That was the answer. That's where we screwed up. That's where we failed. But we can't make that mistake again. And so by doubling down and saying nothing to see here, folks, and no blame on the president or those closest to him or other Democrats in the party, how are people going to believe us going forward? And so to build that trust, to build that credibility, we've got to be honest. And I'd love to see that from the Democratic National Committee.
What would you tell me if I said to you, it's my hunch that anyone seeking the party nomination in 2028 that had any part of this, who does not make a public apology, will not get very far?
I think voters are going to be very interested in
where you were, what you didn't say, and why you didn't say it.
What you knew, and you know,
right?
I think as you get closer and closer to the president, I think the questions are going to become more urgent and more poignant. You know, for everyone who went on TV and said, "Look, I know he looks a little slow. I know that he mixed up the names of the presidents from these countries. I know you have your concerns. I get it. But behind closed doors, he's just running circles around all of us. I can't keep up with Joe Biden." I mean, I want to understand, just, did you really see that with your own eyes? Did you feel like you had to go along to get along, and I understand that, and I understand
or exaggerate on the positive side of the scale,
or exaggerate on the positive side. I mean, this is the most consequential decision that we make as a country. Who will be our leader in the highest position of public trust and authority, the commander-in-chief, the nuclear codes, the most powerful person on the face of the planet, bar none. And your responsibility to America transcends your interest in your career, to your party, certainly to Joe Biden. God love him, and I love him, and I endorsed him, and I supported him in 2020. I think he's one of the greatest presidents we've had in my lifetime. All of that being said, the trouble that we're in right now is a result of those decisions and that lack of fidelity to country first before anything else.
Tell me why in Texas, the border counties that you carried in 2018 against Ted Cruz, more than half of them were lost in 2024. Highly populated by Latinos, young Latinos, who are the future demographic stronghold, theoretically, of one or two parties in Texas. They're up for grabs, but in 2024, they went Trump and Republican. Why did that happen?
Two big things, both on my side of the aisle. One, we got lazy, and not everyone, and I can name hundreds of Democrats who do the work the right way. But as a party, we essentially said, look, if you're black, if you're brown, your vote is already in the bank. You've been voting for us for decades, for generations. Your great-grandparents, your grandparents, you're going to vote for us too. I don't need to show up to the Rio Grande Valley, which is very hard to get to. There's no direct flights there, right? So it's hard to get to. It has very low voter turnout. You're voting for us 70, 80% in these elections. I'm going to go focus on the suburban ring counties of our big cities, go chase that white soccer mom, who herself is very important. I don't want to lose her either. But it just turns out in politics, if you want to be a national party, you cannot take anyone for granted, including those who've been with you before. I'd argue even more so, considering black women who voted for Democrats at a rate of 92%. You go there first and honor their commitment and the fact that they have produced the success that we've enjoyed as a country. You don't turn your back on them and take them for granted. And on the other side of that, you don't write anybody off. You go to those remote rural counties as well. So that was mistake number one. Mistake number two in 2024, and we did this before in 2016. Now, whether that is Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden's fault, and whether that is just the perception and it wasn't the reality, this is what people saw. The Democrats saying Donald Trump is a very bad guy. He's very dangerous. He's going to do bad things to you. Look at all this bad stuff he did in his first term. All that might be true. But if you don't also offer a compelling, ambitious, aspirational vision, here is how your life is going to be better when Democrats are in office. People didn't hear that. Things like, I'm going to make sure that what you take home in pay is enough to live on, so you don't have to work a second or a third job. I'm going to make sure that you can see a doctor when you're sick, before you're sick. I don't want you to get sick in the first place, so I want you to have access to the healthy food, the clean drinking water that far too many Texans are missing. Where were those issues on the table? It was really trying to scare people about someone, and that is never going to be enough to win an election. It is part of it to vote against somebody, but we need something to vote for. And I hope Democrats, all of us, understand that going into 26 and 28.
Before I let you go, on the big issues of 2024, inflation and immigration, let's take immigration first. The Trump White House will say two things. You Democrats had an open borders policy that the country completely rejected. And your quibbling about due process now is merely a way to prevent the rapid deportation of serious criminals who threaten people's lives and sense of safety in their streets. And you're wrong about that, and sanctuary cities and the policies surround that are the living representation of that out-of-touchness on immigration. And that's why we can use things like alligator Alcatraz and not get much political blowback. How would you respond to that?
The president's polling on immigration is at 35% right now. And I concede it was probably of the policy issues, the one that he was strongest on going into the 2024 election. But it just turns out that when you go past controlling our borders, which we can all agree on, go past knowing who's coming into our country, go past protecting one another from violent criminals, and start sweeping Americans off the street without due process, make a feature of cruelty to, immigrants, mixed immigrant families, Americans alike.
Federalize the National Guard, deploy the Marines in Los Angeles.
The American people aren't with you on that one, and he's losing them. And I think that is directly connected to this attempt to gerrymander mid-decade in Texas. He knows he's going to lose the House of Representatives unless he can further tilt the playing field by trying to pick up an additional 5 seats out of my home state.
But that has perils of its own.
And here's one more lesson for Democrats, if I could, and for all the Democrats watching, if I have any left who still count me as one of theirs. Look, I'm just trying to be helpful, and I just want our party to succeed and to win and to hold power in America. We've been talking the biggest game on immigration reform for as long as I can remember listening to Democratic politicians. When we had unitary power, the White House, the House, and the Senate in 2009, we did some great things, but we didn't do immigration. When we held it again in 2021, we did some great things, but we didn't do immigration. So voters can be forgiven for coming to the conclusion that, look, I hear you, and what you're saying makes a ton of sense, but you don't do anything once you have power. When we get power next time, we've got to use it, and that means rewriting these laws. Every dreamer should be a U.S. citizen. Their parents should have the opportunity to be citizens. Folks who are working the most thankless, toughest jobs in America right now, immigrants, they should have a path to citizenship as well. And if you want to come here to join your family, to work a job no one else will, to flee persecution or death, there should be a safe, legal, orderly path for you to be able to do that. But I think at this point, given where we are with immigration in America, it's less about immigrants. It's more about cruelty, division, and distraction from the things that Trump is doing to all of us. The massive transfer of wealth in the big, beautiful bill, adding nearly $4 trillion of debt to the national debt that our grandkids are going to have to pay back, and things that are deeply unpopular in America.
On inflation, Republicans in Texas point to the rapid population gains in that state. Say people are voting with their feet. They're voting from my state of California, coming to Texas. They're coming to Texas from other parts of the country because it's low tax, low regulation, fossil fuel driven. Yeah, there's some renewable energy thrown in there, but it's fossil fuel that's fueling much of Texas's growth. And the low taxes, low regulation, the Trumpian approach to life in Texas is what's drawn people there.
It's the biggest, boldest, most beautiful state in the union. I'm fourth generation in Texas. I wouldn't go anywhere else. And, I think there's some truth to some of the things that you're saying. It's a lighter regulatory touch, and I think that's a good thing. We don't have an income tax, and I think that's a good thing. We have a problem, however, with property taxes, some of the highest property tax rates in the country, and there's not a Democrat that can be blamed for that because we have not had power in that state for about 30 years. But I think it is owed more to the fact that this is a state that cherishes and prizes independence and creativity and diversity. The most diverse city in America is Houston, Texas. When it comes to your point about renewable energy, Texas is generating more renewable energy than any of the other 49 states in the union. We're number one in wind. We may or may soon be number one in solar as well. High-paying, wonderful jobs that are helping this country meet the challenge of climate change and also giving us cheap energy, which is something that as a Texan, I'll tell you that we also love. But what we don't love are leading the nation in school shootings, having this abortion ban with no exception for rape or incest. You mentioned energy. We're the energy capital of the world, but in 2021, when it got cold, we couldn't keep the power on, the lights on, the energy flowing, the heat running. 700 Texans died, many of them freezing to death in their homes. There's a level of incompetence and corruption and big government that we don't like. And if we can mount the candidates, produce the team, the slate across the state and down the ballot, and have that winning vision, not just this stuff is bad, but these are the great things that we want to do, I think we have a chance to win political power in the state of Texas and deliver for the people that we love.
Beto O'Rourke, to be continued. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.